But something that had a big impact on me was punctuality. And I want to talk a little bit about that because, if it's not like for something really, really formal or serious, we had something, we would say, let's say you're invited to a social event and it's supposed to be at 7:00, right? It's no big problem if you turn up at 7:30 or 7:45. And so I was kind of used to that way of being. And then when I went to live when I came in 2005, I spent 7 years in Miami. And we lived in an area of Miami that was predominantly Hispanic. So most of the people I socialized with were Latin Americans who had that same casual view of time. Somebody invited you over to their house and they said 7:00 is no big deal if you turn up at 7:30. So when I moved to South Carolina, well, that was a culture shock to me because the very first people who invited us over to dinner, and in this part, it's a rural part of South Carolina, and so people do things early. So dinner is 4:30, 5:00, and so on. They invited us to dinner at 4:30. And by 4:30, I was still deciding.
You go where?
Like, I want to go where? And
Right.
I was so embarrassed when we got there at whatever time it was. I can't remember. But the people had finished eating. I mean, they still had food that they brought out and gave us, but I was embarrassed because it just showed me. I mean, this is the States, yes, but the way we view time in Guyana for a social event and the way we viewed it in the Hispanic community in Miami is completely different in the American South.
Of course.
Well, I learned my lesson. I mean, I still, and I still struggle with, time. It's still something I struggle with. I remember reading a paper a student wrote recently. She was reflecting on her study abroad experience in Spain. And she spoke about the issue of punctuality. She said, she talked about, it was, to her, it was a shock that professors would turn up to class late. She said she grew up learning, and this is a Caucasian American student. She grew up learning that if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. And I was like, so I'm learning something from reading what she wrote. So, we live and we learn, and those are aspects of the culture that we try to adapt to. And so it's something that has had an impact on me, and I'm trying to work on it.
You have company. my eldest nephew tells me, he says, Althea, I have a meeting at 8:00. By 5 minutes to 8, I'm sitting there at the desk. I'm at 5 minutes to 8. If it's 8:00, I'm late for an 8:00 meeting. I said, ouch. So thank you for that education. I'm a work in progress.
Yes, we are works in progress. So let's and just one quick other thing I wanted to mention, the idea of a good customer service. I really appreciate good customer service, which I find is a big thing here in the U.S. And so now sometimes, like when I go home, I kind of bristle at some, things that happen because I've become so used to good customer service. So that's something that has impacted on me as well.
But there again, Melba, even the punctuality thing, and even talk about customer service. Yes, it's all in America, but it's in what cultural milieu in which you're operating. Because even here, let's say you're talking about the idea of customer service, it's vastly different in certain, no, of course, online, and you're in the big box stores or the big companies, yes. But don't forget that we're the businesses reflect very much the cultural, its cultural place. So if I
Right,
were
right,
to
that's
be
true.
in Brooklyn, New York,
Mhm.
a certain part of it, and I'm no expert, but I'm just thinking of the vast number of Caribbean and other stores. And so the customer service, no, they're smaller, enterprises, they're smaller businesses, but customer service is customer service, right? So the idea is, while we get a certain kind of, and maybe come to expect and probably deserve, very respectful and proficient and efficient customer service experience, sometimes depending on the same cultural parameters,
Yeah.
you may not get that. It
Yes,
sort of
yes.
reminds you a bit of what you get at home.
Right, yeah, that's true.
And,
Mhm.
Even here I'm not in a fully Caribbean area, but so we seek out stores and, restaurants that serve back home food and stuff, whether it's Jamaican or Guyanese food, but you keep wanting to get that kind of ethnic thing. And I have to tell you, sometimes you go into the stores, it's in America,
Mhm.
but you go there and just to get an order of rice and peas, some oxtail, sometimes it can be. So I'm just saying that.
Yeah, yes, I understand the point you're making.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
yes.
not a knock on it. It's
Yes,
just that
the
many
moving
times it's
from the Caribbean space doesn't
yes,
change necessarily,
sometimes,
how
right.
how we interact with people,
Yes.
if we, I understand. So let's talk now about how living abroad has helped to shape our worldview. What would you say?
Okay. Well, we have grown up hearing the world is your oyster. And I found that's a truism that's really inescapable because, you know, if you live in a community all your life and that's your frame of reference, it kind of limits your perspective across the board. Yes, right now we have the internet and people have access to information across the board. But I think when you live in one place for all of your life, there's definitely a limit to your experiences.
Mhm.
Coming abroad for me has really given me an opportunity to experience different cultures, different spaces, different people. And I think it makes a really big difference. You're not just siloed into where I was born and where I grew up and everybody that I know, but you just have experiences across the board that just provides an education beyond an academic program.
Mhm. Mhm.
You learn different cultures. And what I found out and what you, Melva, showcased in some of your stories about living in Africa, you find that there's a lot of similarity in a lot of the stuff that we do, with a lot of the foods that we eat. But just being out there gives you such a broad view of life that you probably would not have had if you just stayed within, say, for instance, the Linden community. Now,
Mhm.
that's not to say those people don't receive an education that's valuable to them, but there's so much more out there. Like I said, the world is your oyster, and your oyster could be Linden, or your oyster could be America, it could be Jamaica, it could be Trinidad, all the different places you've gotten the privilege to travel to. And so, yes, we still would have completed our academic requirements wherever we were,
Mhm.
but just stepping abroad and having these different experiences has, in my opinion, in my experience, has just broadened my frame of reference that I know I would not have had if I just stayed in Linden.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Pat, you're on point. You hear the idea of America being a melting pot. It's a cliche, but it's one with merit, right? It
Mhm.
became a cliche because it had merit, and it's a well-used phrase, but it really is true, and especially here in the Northeast. which is the entry point, not the only point, but in many ways, a big entry point for the migrant wave from all over the world. And as we know, many times before branching off, many stay for some time. So what you have in the Northeast of America, particularly New York, some of it New Jersey, and Connecticut, you have a melting pot. You have people whose worlds you probably would never have even had a touch of, taste of, because food is a big thing too. And unless you jumped on a plane, had either the means or the opportunity to jump on a plane to go to these individual countries. So Pat, you're on point on the idea that while had you stayed in place, you get a measure of success and real success in real terms. It's not in any way to denigrate or to even invalidate those who have not had the opportunity to whether come here or live in other places than maybe where they may have been born. But I would not have been necessarily rubbing elbows with all the different ethnic communities. And you have an opportunity through the neighborhoods that are developed along those same lines. You know, you have the Chinatowns, you have the Italian space, you have the Greek neighborhoods, you have, you know, of course, all the different ethnic and Caribbean neighborhoods that are coming up. So it opens your world, it opens your view. And in the same way in which we're looking for relevance, you know, it's good to be able to welcome other things, new people, new experiences into your world. So the world is the oyster, and it's an opportunity to to open your mind. That I've really tried to embrace it, as I know you all have. So I count it as a meaningful experience to have emigrated here.
Anything you wanted to add on that, Althea, about how living abroad has helped to shape your worldview?
It has in a very big way, to put it rather simply. It really has. Even though I have learned about other countries as a child growing up, listening to the radio and reading the newspapers for so many of us was our way of communicating or learning about what, you know, the lands that lay beyond beyond Guyana. And for me, I recall my dad saying, and he said rather frequently, he'd say, babe, people are people wherever you go. Yeah, Daddy always said that. And I recall leaving Guyana in 88 of February, and it was a very sad experience for me. Understandably, I was leaving my mom and my brother, niece, and nephew for the very first time at 27. And I cried quite a bit. Finally, when I got to Huntsville, Alabama to go to school, I was embraced by this family. Didn't know them from took me into their home for the holidays, treated me as if I were their very own. You know, folks on campus, they're from different countries, you know, they'd take me to the store, take me home on the Sabbath for lunch and that kind of thing. Very warm, very welcoming. And I got my very first teaching assignment in the United States at the parochial school that was associated with Oakwood University. And the teacher, I sat in her Spanish class. I don't know why I took the class because I didn't need it, but I took it. And she was going for a PhD. And she said, Althea, can you teach this high school for me? And I said, would you like me to? And she said, of course. So I said, fine. So I showed up and met this wonderful headmaster, Mr. Monroe, who embraced me. And he said, Miss Casey, it's your class, you know, do as you please. Again, international students, young men and women who I taught them, they also taught me well in the understanding that, okay, the values that you have in Guyana here, how students are taught, we're slightly autonomous. You know, we've got some slightly different rules and regulations here. And I had to learn that. It was beneficial. It was growth for me. I embraced that in Huntsville. I left Huntsville, came to New York, ran into another group of students at a high school, parochial school, and met another group of parents from the Caribbean, which was welcoming, because we reconnected on a level that says, okay, this is the United States of America. It has its values, it has its culture. Okay, we are a subculture, we have to meld. How do we do this all together at the same time, prepare our students for the world of work? And so embracing all of these changes, learning, growing, becoming better, serving the community, took me to San Antonio, Texas, at the tertiary level, working in academia and focusing on student engagement, working with students from Mexico at the high school level and at the college level. What an amazing experience for me, because as Melva, you said earlier on, in that community, in that Latino community, you find that we have more in common than we don't. And it was a beautiful thing. I had these young men out of Chihuahua, Delicias, Oaxaca, several places from Mexico, tall. And they were there to play basketball. And English was so alien to them. And I was that buffer. They'll come to my room during lunchtime or break and we'll talk. We'll do some ESL, we'll do math, we'll socialize. They'll tell me what's happened in their personal lives. I'll share with mine. And one day, one of them did something to me, with me. He walked into the class and he literally lifted me off my legs and started, and he said, Senora, we love you. We thank you for supporting us. And I quickly said, please put me down. I don't want to pass by and assume anything improper. There was any impropriety in but when you are out there and you have the opportunity to change lives, one quick thing I want to share about working with an international community. I perceive it to be international because the students, these women, were from various parts of Mexico, and they were brought into St. Philip's College to be retrained to enter the world of work. Many of them never touched a computer. There was a major digital divide. They didn't have access. Many of them did not have email. Many of them had emails, but did not know how the nuances of working with a platform. At the time, it was AOL, Yahoo, etc. And sitting in the class and learning other applications like Excel and Word and Access in Spanish was a struggle. And so one of them, one day she was about to leave the class. I had no idea. And I called her to the front of the class and she sat there. And later on she said to me, Maestra, I was going to walk out of that class that day because I was so overwhelmed. Over time, she became better. Today, she works at Toyota. One of her sons has become a pharmacist. Another one works as a therapist. He did his master's in, I believe, psychology. Another one, she works at a bank. And these are all women who became empowered because there was an opportunity for that digital divide to be bridged. Mm-hmm. And so it has changed not just their lives, but their generations. And so I believe I am better because I have immigrated to the United States of America. And I know for sure that as many people have supported me and have made a difference in my life, my pastor, who adopted me in San Antonio, has made a significant difference in my life, as I have done in others. And I hope this journey continues. Yes, it's been a good thing for me.
Right.
Really
very gratifying experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. So what have you, we're just going to try to wrap up quickly, but a couple of things we wanted to talk about before we wrap up. Have you had any opportunities to share aspects of Guyanese culture with people that with whom you interact? Well, I mean, I shouldn't even ask that question. I should just say, what, if you could just share at least one experience, just one, yes, I'm just going to reword that. What, could each just give one example of how how you have shared something about Guyanese culture with someone or some group of people with whom you've interacted.
I'm going to say this. First, I'll talk about the generation behind me. Even though they're born in America, these kids try to talk Creolese. They try to they're cool, like everyone say, Mom, wagwan. I said, boy, that's
That
not how
is
you
not
say
Guyanese.
it. And he's a thought. He's like, and he swears that he's got it right, But interesting enough, I always talk Guyanese, speak to him when he was little. And my family would come to the house and say, why you talking to that boy like that? He's not gonna understand a thing you're saying. And I'll say, Evan, just tell your auntie what I just said to you. And he'll translate it in perfect standard English. So for me, having the generation behind me embrace our culture is such a big deal. And we encourage them to be part of it. And they just love to walk around with Evan. Okay, my dad is from Barbados. We're from Guyana. Evan's dad is from Trinidad. And so anytime Labor Day rolled around, he wants an American flag, a Guyanese flag, a Bajan flag, and a Trini flag. I said, boy, you must have to start funding your Labor Day flag situation because they embrace the culture so much. So I think to respond to what you said, yes, we share the culture with our children, even though they were born here and they're American-born citizens. Another experience I've had I love to cook, and when folks, my neighbors and friends, find out that I'm from Guyana, they're like, okay, what can you cook? And so I'm always doing pepper pot and curry and roti, and those things really go along because like one of my girlfriends who lives in the building I'm in, she knows to cook, but she doesn't know how to cook curry. And she went to the store and she bought curry in a bottle in the spice section. I'm sure all y'all know what I'm talking about. It's not indie curry, it's not chief curry. So I said to her, that curry,
That doesn't taste right.
I said you can get good curry from that kind of stuff. So I gave her some indie and she cooked it. And I said, if you know to cook, just flavor it like you're flavoring regular meat and put the curry in it. So she's learning. She hasn't quite gotten the hang of it, but she sent me a curry dish the other day, and it was okay. She's got some way to go. But I find a lot of joy in cooking Caribbean food, cooking Guyanese food, and sharing it with my friends.
Patty has quite a culinary touch, I would say. She's an excellent cook.
I try.
But she talked about language, and food, and those are two really huge things. As I mentioned, I moved to New Jersey, and for the most part, it's not in the heart of a Caribbean setting. So, what my two sons, what they got a fairly good Guyanese upbringing from me because foods and certain expressions, etc. And you continue to expose them to that. But one of the ways I think that really showed me just the kind of pride they took was when each of them first got accepted to college. One of the first things, and this was a commitment of their father, their dad bought each one of them a laptop. They're 3 years apart. And I don't know that the second one tracked what the first one did, but one of the first things they did was they each went on eBay independently and bought themselves a Guyana flag to put on their laptop.
Wow.
To decorate. I mean, they had some other things, I don't know, like Batman or something, Spider-Man. But it's a small thing, but it was so, they remember it, they know it, so it was really impactful. But one of the things that they also felt very proud of was during, especially elementary school, they have international days. And so they were very proud that their mother can procure Guyanese stuff to bring to the school, with some limits because, you have peanut allergies and you have all kinds of stuff. But they really liked when their heritage was highlighted.
Mhm.
And the schools facilitated those things. Again, it's not a hotbed of Caribbean-ness around where they grew up, but I think they felt special in that, and they felt that they were able to talk about their cultural roots. And of course, they went back several times. Really enjoy it and loved being in Guyana, and they have some really warm memories.
What about you, Althea?
All the things I did, and I have to use past tense because I don't make black cake. So mommy, at Christmas time, I'll take black cake back to San Antonio, Texas, and share with my friends. And she also made pepper sauce. I'll take that and you know those little weary peppers, and that kind of, and they looked forward to that. That was my contribution from our community to my folks back in Texas. And in the classroom, which I inevitably come back to, I will identify Guyana on the map. You know, I'll pull up the globe and I will show the folks where Guyana is. And for those who are computer savvy, they'll look up on the computer, see where we are, and learn that we're the only English-speaking country in the continent, blah, 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 and that kind of thing. So I'll tell them they must visit our country. It's a beautiful place to go. That's what I tell them.
Yes, and yes, I've had those similar opportunities, like in classroom sharing with students and with colleagues. And I just wanted to, and of course, whenever you entertain or there's a potluck, we got to carry Guyanese food. So, but the issue of language that Patty raised, I remember at first when I first came to the States, and people would say, that in the 90s, they would say things like, "Oh, how come you speak English so well?" Or what other language do you speak? And I had this, I was like, we speak English, we're an English-speaking country. But then, even though I had learned from, linguistics class at UG that, okay, Creolese is a language. And I was there and I saw the grammatical, that Creolese has its grammatical structure and so on. It's a language. But then as time went on, I found myself starting to more embrace, even though, like we talk Creolese, right? When we're among ourselves, we talk Creolese. So I started to embrace telling people, yes, we do have a language, another language. Guyana is the only English-speaking country in South America. It's the official language, but most Guyanese in casual and other settings use Creolese. And the Creole, Guyanese Creole, and in some cases, I give them examples, a little example, or in some cases I've shared like videos, because there are a lot of little like videos on YouTube and different things, So so I've grown into sharing that aspect of the culture as well.
I'll tell you this, Mel. I'm glad you said that because one day my sister Christine was working in New York before she moved to Las Vegas. And one of her co-workers came to work and said to her one day, "What languages do you speak in Guyana?" So she said, "English." Woman said, "Listen, we have some Guyanese people live next to us, do not speak English." And she's like, "What do you mean that's our language?" And as the girl tried to explain, she realized that they spoke primarily in Creolese and they had no idea what they were saying. And so we had a good laugh about it because we understand Creolese and it's what we're comfortable with, and like at work, when I was working with this Jewish woman, and she said to me, "Patricia, when your family calls, I don't understand a word that you're saying." I'm like, "Yeah, right, that's supposed to be it. You're supposed to hear what I said." She very boldly said to me, I don't understand what you're saying when you speak with your family." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that's cool, that's okay."
You're not supposed to understand.
That's interesting.
One of the secretary in my previous office, she'd say, "Paula, I always know when you got off the phone from talking to one of your compatriots, because it would take me a few minutes after that to understand what you said." So I didn't realize I was seamlessly,
Code switching.
moving from, it was code switching. However, I didn't know that a little bit of the lingo was on my tongue just after if I hadn't happened to speak to her. So she said, yeah, I detect that. And she'd say, one of your compatriots. And I cracked up and I realized what she meant.
It's interesting. We have that in English, right? In our culture. We also have that in the with the Latinos as well. Because when I've learned the Castilian Spanish, right? As we did in high school, remember? And so in the South there, when you're talking to them in Spanish, they're looking at you like, what are you saying? And they'll say, you speak Spanish well. And I recognize the similarity here as we do with the folks in Guyana. They say, oh, that's another language. So the folks in the South, they're speaking the street language. It's the street Spanish, the street form of it. Very colloquial.
The colloquial, right?
Very colloquial, right? And so when I am trying to learn their colloquial expressions, right? And they're trying to learn my grammatical expressions, and then you're at the crossroads here now because and sometimes they want me to speak English because they want to learn English, and I'm like, hey, I want to practice your street Spanish, your colloquialisms as well, So the more we travel, the more we are exposed, we recognize how much we are more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
So it's such a beautiful thing. Yeah, and I've met very nice people along the way. So
That's
I'm the better for it all.
all right. So we're gonna just go to the last point before we wrap up. If you could just share your thoughts on the import, we're all immigrants, and how important do you feel it is for immigrants to be appreciative of the host culture and vice versa, the host culture, well, the host country really being accepting and welcoming to other cultures? If you could just share your thoughts on that.
Okay, I guess I could jump in here. When I first came to America, I really did not understand a lot of the reactions that I noticed from African American people because they'd been socialized here. And there's so much I didn't understand. And it was perplexing because I thought it was so elementary in a lot of ways. But over the years, I've come to understand that the African American experience is very unique, and it's important for us to not be dismissive of it. It's important for us to understand that while we look alike, our experiences shape who we are, our socialization shapes who we are. And so I've become very understanding of why they do certain things, why they react a certain way. Like, for instance, I had a friend, excuse me, that I dated years ago, and we were talking one day, and I say boy, and he's like, Patty, don't call me boy. And I'm like, excuse me, what's so offensive? And then he explained to me that calling a grown man boy in American culture is very derogatory, very disrespectful. And I had explained to him that where I'm come from, any male you could call a boy, whether it's your father, your uncle, your brother, your child. And it's not disrespectful. But I had to be understanding of his frame of reference. And like I explained to him, I said, I respect you as a person. I would not deliberately disrespect you. But because it's such a volatile expression, a volatile expression of derogatory of a derogatory nature, there's no room for them for that to be okay to a Black man who's grown up in America. I used to always say, I don't understand why young men run from the police, but I've come to understand that their experience is so different. They believe that if they run and they get away, they have a chance. But if they're caught, there's a very good chance it's not going to have a good outcome. And so there's a phrase, run for your life. And they really, really do that. And it's very sobering because I have a Black son. And in this country, in this culture, it doesn't matter where he's from, his level of education, he is seen as just a Black man on the streets. And so I've developed a certain empathy and understanding for what these kids go through. There's so much stereotyping out here. And unless you live in a community where you understand it, it's very easy to just be dismissive and not understand their experience. And so, yeah, that was kind of long-winded, but those are cultural things that I've picked up along the way that have really stayed with me.
You know, a very impactful class that I took was I think a 100 level, or maybe by my sophomore year. It was called The Psychology of the Black Experience. Almost single-handedly the most impactful class that I've had. I mean, yes, I did journalism classes. I even did biology. Yeah. But other things. But I have to tell you that the takeaway, it's a course that was offered, 30 years ago. I graduated from undergraduate undergraduate college at Rutgers. And the course is still offered today, called The Psych of the Black Experience. And it offers insight as to why and how race colors just about everything, and the whole idea of the psychological drain of having to navigate and negotiate that through the most banal activities, walking down the street, going into a store, etc. So Pat's experience, there's a name for this, there is a whole range of scholarship to Althea's academic experience and how she operates in that space as a teacher. There is a range of scholarship. There is well-validated scientific that these having to negotiate this day in, day out has an impact on your psychology, your physiology, your well-being, your health. And they used a range of cultural ways to make it palatable to the average, 19-year-old, 19, 20-year-old. And for me, I was older. But they looked at film, they looked at news, they looked at all different things to really give that assessment. And I did realize that this class is still offered today. And if we have a real understanding of how having to operate in this space affects you daily, it's the sort of thing here as parents of African-American boys. Something that we have to teach our boys, especially if they're driving, is how to interact with law enforcement. And it's a burden. It's an extra layer added to the general, real difficulty of, adolescence, right? There's a whole host of things that adolescent boys or young people growing up, period, have to negotiate. They're finding their way in the world. They're getting mature. They're learning to be young men, young women. That's hard enough without having to add that added layer of things. And as some of us, as parents, we have to now add an additional set of instructions of how to be in the world that I really wish we didn't have to, because it's an added burden. It really affects young people and young Black men, young men of color, because they're disproportionately being targeted and interacting with law enforcement. So it behooves us. You asked a question about how, as somebody coming into this country, and the idea of how is it we move here in terms of making allowances, maybe making room and fitting in, and vice versa. And information is key. Information is powerful, right? it erases ignorance. And that's the space sometimes we operate in, where we see differentness as opposed to, as Althea was talking about, commonalities, right? Information, education. And we have a responsibility to put ourselves in the place. Now, everybody's not going to have access to that class that I felt very privileged to have, but a whole generation of students certainly have. And my hope is that even from a majority culture, that they had an opportunity to hear about this and open our ways. And on the other hand, it's also incumbent upon the host country, I think, to put its best foot forward, whatever that means. I mean, it probably will take a week to talk about the ways in which a host country ought to embrace, but with education and I think opening of people's minds and with the ubiquity of travel, I think there is no question that America and the borders being open and people from all over coming, they're going to not only be engaging on American culture, they'll be influencing American culture, you know? So maybe it's gonna all be one big mushy thing at some point down the road, but where we are now, there's certain schisms and there's certain chasms in our understanding and appreciation of each other, and we need a whole lot of healing. Not trying to get political or anything, but it's just a reality. But both sides, what's required is bringing your best empathetic self. Althea talked about that empathy, bringing your best empathetic self. And you came here for opportunity, you came here for education, whatever it is, and you can make use of, utilize the opportunity, but also make space in your own being to learn and embrace.
Okay. And Althea?
Yeah, you know, I heard Paula talk about making space, you know, and it's such a critical term we use. And as I reflect on both Paula and Patty's talking about they're having to raise sons in this society and the dynamics that come with that, the package, the responsibilities, etc. And I can only empathize with them. I have nephews and in that space as well. And so instinctively, your antennae are always up when something, you know, untoward occurs within society. More pointedly to your question about how receptive I am, you know, to this host country's the template that it has, the framework it has for me to function. I don't have a choice but to be responsible in my actions and how I conduct myself within this framework that has been designed for me, over which I have no control, you know, essentially. So I have a responsibility to learn its nuances, you know, where the green lights are, where the amber lights are, where the red lights are, so that I can function in a meaningful way. And there are going to be stumbling blocks. There are going to be roadblocks. I can reflect on your mentioning the customer service experience. I was thinking about that. What happens within here where our community, our West Indian communities, some of the vendors don't feel a sense of urgency to be customer service efficient. You know, they want to think, well, what the hell are you playing? What are you talking about? When you demand very fundamentals, right? And so for me, I have the option to leave. I don't have to return. That's a part of this framework that I don't have to subscribe to, but other things I do. And so I confirm. But in the process of adjusting, conforming, negotiating, at the end of the day, I am trying hard to maintain, or at the core of my being, be the very person I am when I left the shores of Guyana. You know, the values that my parents and my siblings instilled in me, they are fundamentally there. And even though I encounter not very nice situations, I still try not to allow them to impact, to determine, to influence the way I treat the very next person. And so this journey we're all on, I love it. I embrace it. I fight it. I curse at it politely. At the end of the day, I still like it. It's a good thing. And thanks, by the way, for this opportunity, Melvin. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And
I
Paula,
really
thank you.
enjoy. Thanks to you. Thanks to you,
Mhm.
Paula, or Althea, or Patty. You know, I mean, this has been such a rich discussion. I know we could go on and on. I thank you so much for sharing this platform with me today. And to the viewers, thanks for watching. We're going to see you soon as we meet more people and share new experiences in our next episode of Our Culture to the World. Bye, ladies.